Trump turn to politics in the second day of his visit to the UK and meets with Keir Starmer. What do you think the visit represents for Starmer?
Well, the visit actually made of two sections, really, because unlike the king, you have President Trump, who is the head of a state, like His Majesty the King, and is also heads executive government, while our government is actually elected British government, parliamentarian one. So the first one was actually giving President what he really wants, place in history, and that he alluded to that in his speech yesterday during the banquet. He loves Britain. He just gets emotional about Britain because his mother was Scottish and she remained British subject until her passing away. He has been here twice in the last couple of months. And that is actually what he wanted. Today, also, is both leaders, the American leader and our leader, giving each other credit. And Starmer is, I can't even recall, since I started reporting back in 1964, I can't recall any prime minister who has been so down in the poll and his opinion rating is so negative from 1 month after he went into office back last year. So for about 10 months, his rating is really, really bad. So this actually give him a boost because the economy is something very important. And we're talking now about 250 billion pounds going both ways, 150 billion coming from America to be invested here in investment fund, in technology, in AI, and in building nuclear power stations, while about 100 billion going from Britain to be invested in America. So that's the dream of every British leader, and cementing the across the Atlantic alliance between our two nations that's going on for over 100 years now.
Yes, but Mr. Darwish, okay, you're speaking here about the economic side. We're speaking that today's meeting should turn into politics, and we're speaking about disagreement on some of the big files between Britain and the United States, and we're also speaking about protesters in London who made clear their opposition to Trump's visit. So while the government kept him at Windsor, far from the capital's descent, what do you think? What do you think how issues will be discussed, and what do you think this indicates about how the British people receives this visit?
And the British people, I mean, last Saturday marched over 200,000 people actually from the conservative right. And these people are mostly lefties and mostly professional protesters. However, the right to protest and the right to freedom of speech is actually in the core of the meeting, in the core of President Trump's sort of defense and the case of crusade against what I call wokery, trying to silence the opposition. And Britain actually has been the country of the Magna Carta, the country of the studying of the human rights. So we're proud that people can go out and protest their voice. Keeping him in...
Hello? Hello? Mr. Darwish? Right. Right, until we get to Mr. Darwish, let me go here to Mr. Winnie. Trump still faces questions of Jeffrey Epstein, and we've seen definitely the images projected onto the Windsor Castle during his visit, especially after Britain's ambassador to the United States was fired over his ties to Epstein. Now, do you think this issue is going to prevail in the press conference or in the coming meetings or in this visit?
You know, there are always going to be certain types of political conspiracies and issues that are brought up. And the Epstein issue is certainly one that is growing, and there's a lot of interest there. And that's interest from the political right and the political left. And there is certainly a lot of intrigue there. And so far, what has been released and what has been shared has just been disappointing to everyone. And so, there is probably not much there, and whatever is there that's released is probably going to be disappointing. But it shows that if we're focused on this instead of the alliances that are being reached, the countering Russia's aggression in Ukraine, countering China's rise, addressing instability in the Middle East. The United States should not be going alone on this. And we're showing with this visit that despite the noise that these protesters are making and the variety of complaints that they might have, again, they have every right to voice these concerns, but the progress is being made with them or without them.
But
progress is going to be made.
If
Yeah.
I may just
Sure.
comment here, but these were not voices, or they were not just noises. These were people who are protesting against some of the policies of the United States. And you said previously that it remains to see whether people would be with prosperity, or would raise more their voices against policies made by the United States. What does this mean, Mr. Rene? So are we speaking here about prosperity confronted with the opposition to some of the policies, or would people should people just stay silent just because of those investments projects they would be seeing? What do you mean here, Mr. Rene?
Well, again, I am an advocate for the First Amendment here in the United States and the right for protesters to be able to share their ideas and to present them however they may want to do so is fundamental. And so I applaud their voices to be heard. And what I think is something that is important here, though, is that a lot of the things that they're protesting are solved in large part by the decisions that are being made, by the policies that are being implemented. Affluence is something that solves a lot of conflicts. Diplomacy solves a lot more than anything militarily ever will. And so if we're talking about what other, is the disagreement, say, in the war in Gaza, the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of different opinions on that, and there's a lot of daylight in between what the UK and what the US are talking about there. And so America first doesn't necessarily mean America alone, but what it does mean is that there are voices, there are disagreements, and the focus here is trying to find a pathway with diplomacy, to try to find a pathway towards peace. And there are a lot of things that are being worked out, a lot of talks that are happening, and assuring the defense of Europe against an aggressive Russia is another one. So there are a lot of ways where the United States and the UK are working together and trying to find a pathway forward to unite instead of divide. And these protesters might not like a lot of the solutions, but the fact that we're talking about pathways to peace, pathways to prosperity and affluence, again, these are things that benefit everyone, and something that should be celebrated as much as their right to protest and to have their voices heard too. That too should be celebrated.
So let me take it here straight. Today, talks between President Trump and Keir Starmer would turn into politics. What do you think would be high on their agenda of talks?
I think two things. One is the daylight that we're seeing in between the United States and the UK's position when it comes to Gaza, and perhaps the recognition of a Palestinian state. Perhaps the United States sees that as a bit premature. while these fights and negotiations are still ongoing. So I think there's points of discussion there. The other thing is that Russia's aggression is one where we're seeing more and more of the UK stepping up to fund NATO and to fund its own defense. And we're seeing a lot of that too. And part of that will be, again, come back to a lot of these diplomatic and economic discussions when it comes to, say, the purchases of Russian energy and ways to defend Europe against that too. So there are going to be quite a bit of political discussions. There are certainly, even though they're our world's strongest ally, we don't necessarily agree on everything. And again, America first is not America alone. So we can see that there are ways to move forward and define these pathways. But it's a lot easier to work out these deals and a lot easier to have this diplomacy when you're doing so openly and honestly and having a mutually agreed upon desire for peace and a desire for prosperity. I mean, if we were moving forward honestly with those two goals in mind, it's going to benefit everyone.